from the man who is at the center of the legal battle that ignited the disturbances this week in Los Angeles. Rodney King is going to step before the microphones for what we understand is going to be the reading of a statement. He will not take questions, but his attorney, Steve Lehrman, who will accompany him, we understand, will take questions. This will be the first public statement from King since a jury in Simi Valley acquitted the police officer charged with beating him. We're going to turn up our microphones now. That is Rodney King. We will listen to what he has to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for coming. On behalf of Rodney King and all of us that have worked and continue to work with Rodney King to ensure justice being done in his case, we thank you. Until today, Mr. King's personal safety and security could not be guaranteed. And although he wanted to come forward much sooner to call for peace, he was also fearful that his very presence, his very appearance, might incite more violence when his own anger after the verdicts were read might not have had a calming effect. We are all still shocked by the verdict in the Simi Valley trial of the 4 officers charged in the beating of Rodney Glenn King. The aftermath of urban violence inflicted upon the city of Los Angeles and other areas, however, calls for a putting aside of shock and anger and demands that civil order return. And while there's no doubt that the verdicts in the King case precipitated the violence, it is clearly apparent that a senseless and criminal mentality has taken over the streets of our city. Rodney King has this to say to all the people of Los Angeles and all the people of the cities of the United States so caught up in this horror and hate. The killing, the burning, the looting, the chaos must stop now. As an African American and a black man, the victim of the most notorious incident of police excessive force, Rodney King is well aware of the pain and sense of loss, which is a product of violence, however manifested. Rodney King will have justice, but in a court of law. Please do not forget that Mr. King does have a civil rights action pending in Los Angeles, not Simi Valley. When justice will be his. All of us working on behalf of Mr. King to bring the 4 officers to justice, as well as the city of Los Angeles, to account for the unconstitutional policy and practice in existence on March 3rd of 1991, which was the cause of the Foothill incident, are desirous of change, but not destruction. Change in the fundamental way that cops treat citizens of all colors. Although Mr. King is still frightened and anguished by the verdict in Simi Valley, he is mindful of the pain of others, pain sometimes inflicted by the police, and sometimes, sadly, by violence of citizens against citizens. This must stop. He wants this to stop. Don't kill yourselves in his name, but pick up the pieces, rebuild your neighborhoods, and plan on getting along with the police. They are necessary to ensure the safety of this city. Although Rodney King had the misfortune of meeting up with some very angry, out-of-control cops on March 3rd of 91, he knows that not all police are like Powell, Wynn, Kuhn, and Brasino. Police officers that serve their community are supposed to be sensitive to the constitutional and human rights of their citizens. What happened to Rodney King on March 3rd of 91 must serve as an example of cops out of control. This city can't be an example of a society out of control. The time for healing is upon us. Rodney King has prepared a very brief statement. I want to again emphasize to all of you, this is his very, very first public appearance, so much has happened to all of us that live in the city, that live in the country, the world, that the shock, the March 3rd, 91 beating of Rodney King is now revisited upon us 100-fold. Because of that verdict in Simi Valley, our city's been torn apart. Mr. King has anger over that and concern over that, but he wants the citizens, Los Angeles and the world, to know that he will have justice again in a court of law. I've instructed Mr. King that he is response to certain questions which are still the subject of ongoing litigation might interfere with that litigation. And I have requested from all of you that questions not be put to him. I greatly appreciate your respecting our request, and I know that you empathize with our dilemma. Mr. King suffered a great deal on March 3rd and continues to suffer by virtue of that incident. Please, if you can, cooperate and ensure that the strain and stress of an event like this not be more burdensome than it has to be.
People, I just want to say, you know, can we all get along? Can we get along? Can we stop making it horrible for the older people and the kids? And I mean, we've got enough smog here in Los Angeles, let alone to deal with the setting these fires and things. It's just not right. It's not right, and it's not gonna change anything. We'll get our justice. They've won the battle, but they haven't won the war. We'll have our day in court, and that's all we want. And just, I love, you know, I'm neutral. I love people of color. You know, I'm not like they picking me out to be. We've got to quit. We've got to quit. You know, after all, I mean, I can understand the first upset for the first 2 hours after the verdict, but to keep going on like this, and to see the security guard shot on the ground, it's just not right. It's just not right, because those people will never go home to their families again. And I mean, please, we can get along here. We all can get along. We just gotta, you know. I mean, we're all stuck here for a while. Let's try to work it out. Let's try to beat it. You know, let's try and work it out.
Thank you. Thank you. No question. No question.
Thank you very much.
So Steve and I will be available if you have any questions. Go ahead. Okay.
Go for it, man. Yes, sir. The pressure that's building on the federal government has been building for over a year. The United States Department of Justice, civil rights investigators, the FBI have been in contact with my office and my staff since day one of this incident. It's only now, when it's evident that, in a sense, the system has made a lot of people very unhappy, it would now appear that there are political pressures that are being brought to bear upon the powers that be. And to the extent that those pressures are creating action, so be it. We welcome a federal civil rights criminal investigation. We welcome federal indictments. We welcome federal prosecution. Sooner the better. Yes, sir. I would say that the case that was presented in Simi Valley, when compared to the case I intend to put on in federal court, will have no resemblance. Many, many, many witnesses, not the least of which is Mr. Rodney King himself, will be called. Witnesses which will attest to Mr. King's complete compliance, complete order, the scene of the arrest, the incident. We will intend to introduce much more documentary evidence of the totality of the cover-up involved, and I have no doubt that a federal civil rights jury sitting in the hearing of this matter will render a verdict in favor of Rodney King. I don't believe I said that it would be a setback. I never said it was a setback. I said that it would entail us having to, in a sense, establish all over again that the officers used excessive force. And to the extent that our case would have been streamlined had there not been acquittals, and instead would have allowed us to proceed directly against the target defendant, the truly culpable party in all of this, the city of Los Angeles, policy and practice, we now have to address this other issue, this other component we'd hope would have, in a sense, been resolved in Simi Valley. But it's not a setback at all. We'll go forward and do whatever we have to.
Mr. Lerman, do you feel you at all inflamed the community by your comments, which were rather, they were about as heated as they get. You were just absolutely outraged when the verdict came down. Do you regret being as strong as you were immediately following the verdict?
I don't regret being strongly in favor of the interests of my client, and in fact, I've had many people that have contacted my office, clients, friends, and staff, and have all said that I gave voice to a lot of their frustrations, and that, in a sense, I spoke for all of them. And I've had nothing but supportive commentary. I think that the nature and scale of the violence, especially since the people that started rioting in front of the courthouse had already started way before my comments were aired, is evidence that the events of the last several days have had nothing to do with Steve Lerman's comments.
Steve, can I ask you two questions? First of all, do you think, you've been very honest with us before, do you think George Bush and the Justice Department would be so anxious to get a civil rights indictment against the four officers? If one, the verdict hadn't been what it was, and two, the reaction had not been what it was, do you think Bush is just responding to this?
Well, in the first place, had there not been these verdicts, there would be no need to have federal indictments. And to the second, obviously, I believe, and anyone can see that there are political pressures being brought to bear. I do also believe that the president is sincere in his disgust at this incident and his obvious need to bring about law and order. This is a national problem right now. It's not just Los Angeles or California, but it's spreading and may even continue to spread, regardless of what Rodney King or Jesse Jackson or Mayor Bradley have to say. This is a horrible cancer. It seems to be fueled on its own now, and it may, in fact, start going well beyond the issues in the Rodney King case.
Second question, Barr apparently today is announcing a certain direction to go for an indictment, either about to have an indictment or that he intends to seek one. What's your reaction to that?
I believe he's well-intentioned, and I wish him Godspeed. We've been contacted by members of the Federal Department of Justice, and we have ensured them our cooperation, and we have ensured that we'll make available all of our materials to them for their investigation, and they're counting on it. That broke his heart. That broke his heart. He was almost in tears when he was talking about it to me. He said, "Why does that have to happen?"
Does Mr. King feel guilty about all the rioting that has taken place? Because
No.
we know that from the LaTasha Harlins case, from Mike Tyson down to Mike Tyson in the black community, does Mr. King feel the guilt all upon his shoulders?
Mr. King is proud to be an African-American man living in Los Angeles in 1992 and was proud to be so in 1991. The sense of violation and shame that these officers visited upon him is what he has distress in. He is not guilty for anything. The officers that beat Rodney King are the ones to concern themselves with guilt. Mr. King is innocent of wrongdoing.
Doesn't feel apologetic for anything?
I don't think he has anything to be apologetic for, ma'am. And I don't believe anybody does. Yes, sir. Well, I didn't want Mr. King to inflame, to incite, to encourage civil unrest. I knew that his presence alone at any press conference, given the state of technology the media has, in which his image could be used in a split screen with graphic pictures of fires and destruction and death, and I thought that it might be used and, in fact, embraced by others that are looking to foment anger and distrust in our city, outside people coming in and looking to stir up problems. I was afraid that would happen, and so King, despite his concerns that he stepped forward immediately, was told that his security had to be paramount. We wanted to do this yesterday, but my God, the streets were on fire. The police were going back and forth. Tom Owens, our investigator, was shot at outside of a TV studio yesterday afternoon and had to draw his own automatic weapon in defense. And they didn't know who he was. He was just a man. And so with that backdrop, I haven't felt confident in bringing Mr. King out into public until today, when the National Guard, the Army's on the way, and the city of Beverly Hills has guaranteed our security here. And under no other circumstances would I have even conceived that Mr. King would have been allowed to come forward as he wanted to.
Have any leaders or officials contacted you and either tried to encourage you to bring him forward or discourage you from bringing your client forward?
Well, I would say that right before the press conference today, I had a contact from a member of Mayor Bradley's staff. And the staff member was very concerned about what the message Mr. King would be putting out would be. Obviously, he was concerned that there might be a reaction which would further exacerbate and aggravate our situation. When I informed him of the content of Mr. King's message, although I knew not what he would say, as you all saw, he made it up on his own as he went. It was an emotional message based on his feelings. The mayor's office was very content to let him come out here and address some of these people that are mindlessly and senselessly killing and looting. That is an excellent observation. Mr. King is not a well man. He's not well adjusted. He's living an abnormal life. This incident, contrary to what some people have thought it would be, has not made him desirous of celebrity, has not made him desirous of any kind of notoriety. He wishes and sometimes just breaks down in that this would have never happened. Well, I don't want to get into that too much, but he does receive professional treatment.
Are you going to be, sort of like one of those media questions, is he going to have one of these big prime time interviews with any of the networks? Are you going to make him sort of equally available to all of us?
Mr. King will not be available for interviews. Mr. King does not intend, nor does he want to do the talk show circuit. Mr. King has never sensationalized his case. He has never gone to political rallies. Mr. King is a private man who is dealing as best he can with his hurt, his fear, his pain, and he continues that it be that way. He only wanted to come forward today to address the people of Los Angeles that might just sit back and listen to what he had to say.
Can you tell us what he's been doing over the past few days since the verdict came out?
Since the verdict, Mr. King has been literally glued to his TV set and in just sheer horror and has been begging me if there was something that he could do to stop it. And I said, we have to wait till we can make it sure you're safe. And today was the day. Yes, sir.
Talked about imagery, and we've seen him now first time in a year, some of us for the first time ever. This man is not as big, is not the monster that they have painted him to be in court. Do you regret him not showing up in court, not having the jury see him, particularly since he seemed very humble?
Mr. King is not only my client, he is, I am proud to say, my friend. I welcome Mr. King in my home with my children at any time, with my parents at any time. He is not a violent man. He is not a gorilla. He is not a monster. And you're right, he's not that big. He's just a person. He's the person that got beat. He didn't fill out a job application. And I would have done anything to have seen that he would have gone forward as a witness for this prosecution. But ultimately, they chose not to make Rodney King the issue in the trial, which surely it would have been, but rather the beating of Rodney King. Ultimately,
As Steve Lehrman, he is the attorney to Rodney King for the civil proceedings that are pending against the city of Los Angeles. According to Mr. Lehrman, it was Rodney King who appealed for the opportunity today to appear to make a public statement. We were told he was going to read a statement. Instead, it appeared to be off the cuff and an emotion-packed statement that began with the words, "Can we all get along?" Rodney King, appearing before the public with his attorney, Tony Clark, is in Los Angeles. He has been observing what we've been seeing. Tony, what can you tell us from behind the scenes?
Lou, it was a very emotional scene here. In fact, one of the security people that has been with Rodney King came out in advance, and he said Rodney King is a very shy person, and if he saw a large number of people huddled around the microphone, he simply would not come out here. And so everyone was backed up. There's been a large crowd, of reporters, and also a crowd of spectators. As you know, most of the local activities have been canceled. Businesses have closed down today. School is closed. So we've had a variety of spectators here, everything from elderly women, one woman with binoculars, to young girls with shaved heads here. Everyone here to see Rodney King for his first statement in over a year. It was, Lou, as you said, an emotional statement. And after he called for calm, after he called for peace, Rodney King was escorted away from here with about 10 security guards around him, fading back away, now waiting to see if the public responds to his call for peace and calm. I'm Tony Clark, CNN, reporting live from Beverly Hills.
The violence in the current Los Angeles disturbances have now topped the Watts riots back in 1965. The current death toll stands at 37 deaths from these disturbances, 8 of them today. The Watts riots took a toll of 34 people back in 1965. Damage estimated in the Los Angeles area at $550 million. Up next, an abbreviated version of Showbiz Today when we continue along these lines on this subject. Celebrities in Hollywood joined together to protest the King verdict. Sean Penn will be the featured guest live. We'll also hear from Angelica Houston and Wesley Snipes. For Lou Waters, I'm Cheryl Atkinson.